Welcome back to Afternoon Live. Do you struggle with making decisions? Do you second guess your choices? Well, our next guest has trained military leaders to be decisive and is here to help us. We welcome 26-year veteran with the U.S. Air Force and executive coach. Dr. Mike Smith is with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Smith.
Hey, Kara, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
So does decision making, has it always just come naturally for you?
So a lot of times with decision making, for me, it's intentional and purposeful because, we have so much coming at us, so many influences, preconceived notions, emotion, right, is one of the biggest driving things. So really, to be an effective decision maker, it takes intent, focus, and purpose.
Very intent for you, being in the U.S. Air Force. Share with that experience how that maybe changed you into making decisions.
So one of the things I think specifically that the military did for me is it allowed me to, obviously we have rules and regulations in place, right, that form the guardrails, but a lot of times it's all scenario based, right, the circumstances you're in at the time. And one of the important things is to have freedom and flexibility as a leader to make decisions, but also create your own guardrails so you don't kick the can down the road, act on emotion, and so on and so forth.
Such like huge things, right? I mean, you're making big, major decisions when a lot of people like me, I can't even go to a restaurant and decide very easily. So do the same kind of tips kind of play into role whether you're making those big decisions or those little minute ones?
Absolutely, just to different degrees. And there's several tips that help for effective decision making. And again, even in personal life, professional life, it translates and carries over very well.
Yeah, and I really like your tips today because you can really, they're tangible, all of them. The first one is to apply probability to your decision making. Share what that means.
So basically, when we're talking about applying probability to decision making, that really means just raising our own awareness around all the events that could possibly come up while we're headed down that road of any particular decision that we're making. And that really does two things for us. When we're aware of all the events that could happen, it kind of opens our mind so we don't stay locked in. And then it also allows us and gives us permission to ourselves to pivot and course correct if we need to change our way of thinking and go down a different path.
See, I hear that and I kind of get a little more stressed out about the decision because it makes me overthink, perhaps, right? And so what do you do when you're an overthinker in that situation?
So one of the things you can do that's probably the most effective is limit your choices, right? Limiting your choices are kind of like those guardrails that you put in place to keep yourself in the lane, moving down the road and making progress. And when we talk about limiting choices, generally speaking, there's three things that you consider: is effectiveness, efficiency, and impact, right? The decision you're about to make, is it effective? Is it going to serve and help others? Is it efficient? Are you doing it the best way possible with the resources, the time, and the money that you have? And more importantly, what type of impact is it going to make for those that are involved in that process and outside of it?
Would you say to create that big list and then limit it down, or come up with your good, solid first three things and cut it off?
So that's a really good question, Kara. So one of the things that's also important to this is identifying and becoming aware of your biases, right? So in any given scenario, based on our experience, our upbringing, our environment, those impact moments in life that kind of help shape us, we carry biases with us. So a lot of times when we hear a certain topic, we're asked to make a decision on a certain subject, right away, kind of almost by autopilot, those biases creep into our subconscious and already we're starting to go down that road. But if you're aware of your biases, bring in that probability that we talked about, and then limit your choices again by starting with that bigger list, because you don't want to close yourself out when it comes to decision making. Because the flip side of that coin is if you get too focused and too narrow, you could miss that one little opportunity to make a critical decision that could give you huge dividends in return. So starting with the bigger and going down, just like an hourglass where the sand goes right through.
Can you give an example of being aware of your biases?
Yeah, actually, so this one was kind of one that I had to really become aware of when I first made the transition. I mean, you can imagine 26 years in the Air Force, where you have all those rules, the regulations, the guidance, the attention to detail, the teamwork, then moving into and making the transition to corporate America in the civilian life. So for me, I had mentors that helped me along the way. So my transition was really smooth. So in my mind, my bias would be, hey, transitioning from military life to civilian life, piece of cake, good to go. That is not the case for a lot of people because certain things could be missing. They may not have those mentors. So if I were to approach someone that was struggling with that transition, and if I were to take the attitude like, come on, really? What are you talking about? Like, the transition is really easy. That would be very detrimental, not only to me, right, as a leader, but also to that person.
And to be aware of that is that's just a whole nother skill. You know, your next step is to improve your predictions through objectivity. What does that mean? Yes.
So looking at things through the lens of objective reality versus delusion, right? So a lot of times in the absence of information, you know, we tend to paint our own pictures in our mind. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it could be dramatic. It could be a little bit bigger than we really think it is. So if you peel back the emotion, take that out, and just look at everything through that lens of objective reality. What are the facts? What am I, no kidding, honestly dealing with from a logical perspective? That's really going to help you make a much more informed decision based on logic versus emotion, because, you know, we all know emotion can cloud judgment. It's great for motivation, but it can cloud judgment.
It definitely can. You know, I think that's a big one to teach as a parent as well, and noticing that in your kids and having them recognize that. I know that you're a dad. Have you ever come across that with your kids or trying to help them make decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. Nowadays, we're empty nesters, so it's just me and my wife and our 2 little Yorkies. But raising the kids, you're absolutely right. And for them, I think it was maybe a little bit difficult, you know, being military brats, if you will. So I tended to pay a lot more attention to detail and just kind of be more engaged. And you know, depending on where you live and the times, I mean, there could be a lot of things that influence and try to drag kids away from, you know, focus and go down different paths. So remembering these kind of tips and applying them to your kids and just talking to them, like explaining the why. You know, don't be so quick to say, well, just do it because I said so, right? Attach a why to it so there's deeper emotional meaning and a connection.
Okay, you're talking about that with the kids. With the Thunderbirds, you're not explaining any why probably with those decisions. Can you share about that experience with the Air Force and the Thunderbirds?
Yes. So the Air Force and the Thunderbirds, that was the best job I ever had, I have to say. First of all, we got to travel the world representing the Air Force, doing the air shows in front of hundreds of thousands of people all the time. So it was great, right? Living like a rock star. But I think the bigger thing, as you can see from that photo on the screen, is every show that we went to, we made it a point to always do things like the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Children's Hospital visit, Veterans Hospital visits, speaking at colleges and high schools. So really just building those relationships and making that impact in the community and representing the bigger military. To a lot of times, you know, the civilian communities, the only military they know is what they see on the news. So to be able to personalize and humanize that military collectively was just an amazing opportunity that I'm so, you know, humbled and grateful that I got to be a part of.
Well, I should have made it my first off, but I'll make it my last off. Thank you so much for your service, and thank you for the advice today. Great advice.
Thank you very much, Kara. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. We appreciate yours as well. We're going to have more information about Dr. Smith on our website at KATU.com. Don't move. Afternoon Live. We'll be right back.